With ever-changing business dynamics and ever-evolving technical landscape, for IT teams, being agile and nimble is no longer a choice, but a necessity. Welcome to Ask Trailblazers. I'm Arshad Ali, and in this video, I'm going to talk in detail about Azure Synapse's native integration with Azure DevOps and GitHub. I will then demonstrate how we can set up Git repository and build pipelines for continuous integration and delivery of Synapse workspaces artifacts from one environment to other environment. Continuous integration, or in short, CI, is the process of automating the build and testing of code every time a developer commits a change to a version control like Git repository in a consistent and an automated way. Whereas on the other hand, continuous delivery, or CD, is the process of building, testing, configuring, and deploying a unit of build from one environment to another environment. For example, promoting a build from development to test and from test to production. CI/CD bridges the gap between development and operations team by automating the building, testing, and deployment of application. In Synapse, promoting a workspace from one environment to another environment is a two-part process. First, by publishing feature, we create an Azure Resource Manager template, or insert ARM template, which acts as a deployment unit. Then we deploy this deployment unit, which contains artifacts like SQL scripts, notebooks, Spark jobs definition, pipelines, dataset, data flows, by using Azure Synapse CI/CD tools in Azure DevOps or on GitHub. In this demo, I have these three workspaces created. And with each of these workspaces, you'll see there is a suffix which denotes the environment that it belongs to, right? So in the first case, I have dev. In the second one, I have UAT and prod. This is not a necessity. You don't need to name your workspaces like this. I have named it in this way to make it simpler to understand we are moving from one environment to other environment. You have full control in how you name these workspaces, and you still get the benefit of moving workspaces artifacts from one environment to other environment. With that, let's look at the dev lifecycle with Azure Synapse. The very first thing that you notice over here is we need to do is to create GitHub repository projects, or we have to create a project in Azure DevOps. And the first thing that we have to do right after that one is to create a collaboration branch. We often name it as a master branch. Then if a developer starts working, or a team of developers start working on any feature, we need to create a feature branch for them to kind of collaborate and build the solution or the feature in that branch. They'll keep on committing their changes into a working branch for that specific feature. And once they are satisfied with their changes, they'll create a pull request, and that will trigger a email or notification to a reviewer to review the changes for that feature and approve it. Once this gets approved, the changes from working branch or the feature branch are merged into collaboration branch or master branch. At this time, if all the features have been built and it's ready to be deployed into the next environment, you can publish those changes from master branch to publish branch, and this is where the ARM template gets created. We'll look at those details once we get into the demo, but this is where the deployment unit gets created and stored. At this time, you can take this ARM template and create release definition in Azure DevOps. You can create a release pipeline, and you can define how this is going to be deployed. You can map all the parameters from one environment to other environment, and then once the release definition is done, you can either manually deploy that release to other environment, or you can set up the automation to be deployed into the next environment. So this release gets deployed to the test environment, and once all the test cases have been passed, you are all set to do the deployment into the production environment. So in a nutshell, this is overall DevOps lifecycle for majority of the Azure Synapse application that you will be building. With that, it's time to look at how to set it up in practical scenario. As a prerequisite, we first need to make sure we have Azure DevOps organization already created, and then the next step is to create the project in that organization. In my case, I have this organization already created, so I'm going to create a new project so that I can use it with my Azure Synapse workspace. You might have a project already which you can leverage to connect it from Synapse workspace, but in my case, I'm going to start it from scratch. So let me click on new project and create a new project for myself. So I'm going to give a name here, and then I need to specify the description that I want to provide for this project. Here it goes. And then in terms of visibility of this project, what level of visibility I'm going to provide, right? Whether it's going to be a public DevOps repository or enterprise level, or it's going to be private. In my case, I'm going to make it private because I'm only working on this one for now. So let me go ahead and select private and then click on create to create this new project. It's going to take a couple of seconds, and once the project is ready, we can have a look. So here we have now our first project created, or Azure DevOps project created. If we can look at the repository, we'll see that there is no repository yet created. It's blank for now. There is no branches as created. It's blank for now. Now, as a next step, we have to install Azure Synapse Workspace deployment extension in this organization that I'm using, right? And to do that, let me go to the home page by clicking on Azure DevOps. This will take me to the organization I'm part of, and on the bottom you'll see an option to change the organizational setting. Click on this. It will take us to a new screen where we can see there are multiple options here on the left side, and I want to install an extension for Synapse Workspace deployment. Click on this. For now, you'll see I don't have this deployed yet, so I need to kind of click on this browse marketplace, specify the name of the extension that I want to deploy, right? In my case, it's going to be Synapse Workspace deployment, right? Click on search. This is what I need to deploy for CI/CD operation. Click on this. Click on get it free. It's asking for the organization where I want to install this extension. In my case, it's ARALI data. Click on that. And now my extension has been created or installed in my organization. If I go back to my extension page and refresh it one more time, I'll see that extension getting listed over here at the bottom, right? So this extension is installed here. Once we have met the prerequisites from Azure DevOps side, we can go to Azure Synapse workspaces that we have created, right? To do that, let me go here, and this is my resource group, and inside this resource group, if you notice, there are 3 workspaces created, one for dev, prod, and UI. Then each of these workspaces has default storage location, or basically a data lake storage account associated to it. And because I'm going to demonstrate creating a notebook which will run on a Spark pool, I have created a Spark pool in each of this environment. So if you have a notebook which references a Spark pool, it's important to create those Spark pool in all the environment where you are going to do the deployment, or else a deployment will fail. And I'm going to demonstrate that. So if you see here, I have created this Spark pool in my dev and UAT environment. I have not done it for production, and I'll show you when we do the deployment in production, it will fail, and before we can make it work, we have to first come here and create a Spark pool for the production, right? So for now, let's keep it simple. Let's just start with these 3 workspaces. And as you can see, these 3 workspaces are in single resource group, and they are all part of same subscription. But in your scenario, it could be in a different resource group. It could be in a different subscription, and it's all fine. The deployment process is not going to change. Going to be perfectly fine the way we are going to do the deployment now. In my example, I have created 3 workspaces: dev, UAT, and prod. But you might have more than 3, right? So you might have dev to test to UAT to prod, right? It doesn't matter how many environment that you are going to create. The deployment process is going to be same. You just have to kind of follow the same process, and you need to do it for as many as environment you want to kind of do the deployment on. And we'll look at those deployment pipeline. So once we have this prerequisite of creating these workspaces are done, we can go to Synapse Studio for each of these workspaces and have a quick look. So this is my dev workspace, and this is Synapse Studio, where I have opened this workspace. And if you come here and open, click on Develop tab on the left, you'll see that this workspace is currently connected to Synapse Live. So Synapse Live is where like all the artifacts that you are going to create in this workspace, they are going to be stored as part of the Synapse service. But this is what we want to change. We want to change it to store all these artifacts in Git repository that we just created. And to do that, we have to either click on this place on this combo and click on Setup Code Repository, or we can go to Manage, and on the tab list that we have over here, go to Source Control heading, and then under that heading we have Git configuration. Click on this, click on Configure, and then specify the repository type that we want to use. Azure Synapse supports Azure DevOps as a Git repository, or you can use GitHub as a Git repository. It could be enterprise GitHub, or it could be public GitHub. I'm going to use Azure DevOps for now. So let me select this Azure DevOps, and then it's going to ask me the Azure Active Directory tenant, where I have this DevOps organization and project created. So I select that, and if I click on Continue, it will take me to the next page, where it will ask me to choose the organization that I want to use for connecting this workspace to, right? So in my case, it's ARALI data. I'm going to select that, and it's going to show me all the projects in that organization. So I'm going to use the project that we just created, Synapse CI/CD demo ADO, right? And then we want to create the repository. So in this case, I'm going to give the same name for the repository as the project name, right? And then in terms of collaboration branch, we can specify the name of the collaboration branch. It's recommended to create it as a master. That's a standard that people have been using. So let's go ahead and let's create a master branch for collaboration. So my collaboration branch is going to be master. Publish branch is going to be by default named as workspace _ publish. Let's keep it that way. So let me click on apply, and it's going to take few seconds before it can create or connect to the Git repository. At this time, as you can see, the configuration is done, and we have successfully able to connect this workspace to the Git repository that we created, right? In case in case if you want to kind of disconnect it from the Git repository and if you want to use it in a Synapse Live mode, there is an option here to disconnect it from the Git repository. For now, we don't need to do that. So let's go back again to the develop page or develop tab here, and if you see here on top of this combo master branch is selected, right? Now suppose there are a couple of developers who are going to be working on a new feature. So for them, we need to kind of create a new feature development branch, right? So let's say we want to do that, and for that we need to create that branch. So click on this new branch options over here, and then specify the name for that branch, and you can give any name that makes more sense for that specific feature. I'm just saying new feature in this case, and I'm going to create this branch based on what is already there in the master branch, right? So let's click on create, and as you can see, we have this branch created. If we kind of click on this combo, you'll see this is the master branch, this is the branch that we just created. And because we have not created any artifacts so far, you'll see nothing coming over here, right? And this is something that we can validate by going to the Azure DevOps repository that we have, right? So let me go back there. Let me go here. And this is the project that we created. And if we look at the project that we created, go to the repository. At this time, we'll see there is one repository created by the same name as the project, right? So this is the name of the project, and this is the name of the repository as well. And if we go to the branches, we'll be able to see that there are two branches. One is the master branch, or basically the collaboration branch. We named it as a master, and the other one is new branch that we created for the feature that we are going to develop, right? And at this time, if you look at if you go to any of these branches, because there is nothing created yet, you'll not be able to see anything coming over here. So we have credential, integration, runtime, and linked services, but there is nothing created. These are all by default that comes in as a artifacts. So let's go ahead. Let's go back to the Synapse Studio for development environment again, and at this time let's create a notebook, right? So to do that, click on go again to the develop tab. If you are not there already, click on this develop tab, and on the develop screen over here, click on the plus sign and click on notebook, and then specify the name of the notebook that you are creating. So I'm going to name this by this name. I'm going to say Synapse CI/CD demo notebook, right? And then you can put the command that you want to execute as part of this notebook. For simplicity's sake, what I'm going to do is going to simply read for simplicity's sake, I'm going to read the data from public open data set and write it into the default storage location that we have, right? This is a very simple command, but you can have as complex as command that you want to write into your notebook. The process is going to be same, right? And because this is a notebook, this notebook gets executed on Spark cluster. We need to attach it to any of the existing Spark pool that we have created in this workspace. I have this one Spark pool created. It's named Spark pool version 3.1. I'm going to select this, and at this time I'm going to keep it simple. You can have as many cell you want to add to this notebook, and as complex as processing that you want to do, but for now let's keep it simple. At this time I can click on commit. When I say commit, this is being committed to the feature branch that we just created, right? There is an option to click on commit here. This is going to be kind of committing the changes into this notebook. If you have multiple notebook and if you have made changes into multiple notebook, you can click on commit all, where it will kind of do a patch update to all the artifacts in one go, right? Clicking on this commit is going to be kind of committing the changes only is specific to this tab that you see over here, and in this case it's a notebook. So let me kind of go ahead and click on commit. My notebook has been submitted, and if I go back again to the repository that I have at this time, if I go to branches and look at the different branches that we have, and you can see this, my new feature branch is one change ahead of my master branch, and this is the one change that we just made, right? If we click on this new feature branch, you'll be able to see that notebook folder now appearing over here, and the notebook that we had there is coming over here, right? So this is all good. We can see the changes is coming into the feature branch that we have created. So these changes are still in feature branch. This has not gone to master branch, and we can go and validate that, right? So if we click on branches again and go to master branch, we see that the changes was only committed to feature branch. So we do not see a notebook folder here or the notebook artifact over here yet, right? And we'll see how to move that into master branch. So once we have this notebook created or kind of created and committed to the feature branch, let's go ahead and create some other objects. So let's go ahead and create a pipeline, right? So in this case, I'm going to create a pipeline to call this notebook or execute this notebook, right? So click on integrate and click on plus sign under integrate. This will give you an option to create a pipeline. Click on this pipeline, and let's name this pipeline right. And what I'm going to do in this pipeline is I'm going to add a activity to call the notebook that I just created. So let me kind of hide this for a moment just to get some more space, and let's say we want to name this activity as nb-call, or basically we are calling a notebook. Click on settings, and this is going to give us all the notebook that we have in this workspace. We created this notebook, so we are going to simply say this is the notebook that I want to execute, right? And all the errors have gone now, and we want to commit these changes again to the feature branch that we have created. So let me kind of hit on commit, and then you'll see this artifact has also been kind of committed to the feature branch that we have. And again, we can go to branches here. We can look at new feature branch, and you see this new feature branch is 2 changes ahead of master branch. And we can go to this branch and we can look at this pipeline folder, and this is a pipeline that we just created, and you can see it's coming over here. Assuming that this is one of the features that we just developed, and we are good to go ahead and do the deployment of these changes from development to test. In actual scenario, you might have multiple features being developed at one time and getting deployed at one time. But to keep it simple, let's say we just have created a notebook, we just have created a pipeline, and that pipeline is calling that notebook, right? And this is one feature that we want to go ahead and do the deployment of, right? So the first thing that we have to do here in this case is we first have to merge the changes that we have in the feature branch to the master branch. And in order to do that, we need to create a pull request. So developer has to create a pull request. We can do that here in Azure DevOps portal, or we can do that in Synapse Studio workspace. So if we go back here, if we look at the combo again here, we'll see there is an option to create a new pull request, right? So click on this create pull request, and it's going to take us back to Azure DevOps again, and it's going to ask us to kind of provide a title for the pull request that we are going to create. and let's say this is something that we want to specify over here. So we are going to kind of merge new development feature notebook and pipeline to the master. You can provide a description as you see fit, and then you can say create, right? So at this time, pull request has been created for reviewer to kind of review the changes and approve if it looks good to take it to the next step, or a reviewer can reject it. So in that case, it will go back to the developers to work on it to fix those review comment or incorporate those review comment. Considering that this feature is complete and I am the reviewer, I can go ahead and click on complete. The moment I'll click on complete, it's going to ask me if I'm ready to do the complete merge from feature branch to the master branch. So once the merge is complete, during that merge, it's going to take all the artifacts that's there in the feature branch, going to merge it with the artifacts in the master branch and delete the feature branch. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me click on this complete merge, and it's going to kind of run for a few seconds while it's doing the merge. And now we can see this merge is complete. If we go back again to the branches, you'll see that there is only one branch now, master. The feature branch that we had earlier where we made the changes or committed the changes, those changes have been now merged to master, and master is most up to date with all the changes. If we can click on master, we'll see that the notebook and the pipeline that we created are part of this master branch at this time. Now if you go back again to Synapse Studio portal and refresh the page, you'll see the same status being reflected over here. So let me refresh the page. Once it loads, you can again click on this combo and you'll see this. We just have master branch. We don't have any kind of feature branch as of now, right? So at this time, our changes have been merged into the master branch. We can continue to let developers work, build a feature, and start merging those features back into master branch. And once the number of features which are supposed to go into the next environment is ready to be deployed, we can click on publish. So when we click on publish, what it does is basically it takes all the artifacts from the master branch and it's going to create the ARM template. ARM template is basically Azure Resource Manager template with all the artifacts embedded into it. So basically it's a deployment unit that's going to be deployed into the next environment. So when we click on publish branch, when we click on publish, it's going to create those artifacts for us. So let me do that, and if you see here, it's saying that these are the two changes or two artifacts which have been added, and this is why it's saying added, because we have this new keyword over here. If we are making any change, it will be updated. In our case, it's all new artifacts that we have added. Click on OK, and this is going to go ahead and create the ARM template for deployment. So as you can see, templates have been created, and we can go back again to Azure DevOps, and if we can click on branches, we'll see there is one more branch over here, workspace publish. And if you can click on this workspace publish, you'll see there are two artifacts created over here. Template for workspace. So this is the deployment unit, or this is the ARM template that has been created by that process, and it includes all the artifacts that we had in the master branch. So it's a single unit of deployment, and you can see this by looking into details of it. So we created one pipeline, and we named this pipeline by this name, right? So this is one component or artifact that we had in the master repository. Likewise, if we go down, you'll see there is one for a notebook also, right? That's created over here. Let me go back to the notebook, right? So you see this, there is a notebook also created over here, right? So all the artifacts that were there part of the master branch are included in this template for workspace.json file. This is the ARM template which will be used for deployment from one environment to other environment. The one thing that you will notice over here is the name of the workspaces that we have created. We have created it differently from one environment to other environment, and that was intentional. So if you look at the name, the dev keyword in the name, whereas the UAT has UAT, and then prod has PID. So we have to parameterize this, right? So we want to take some artifacts from dev. I want to do the deployment into UAT environment, but the UAT environment has a different name than the development environment. So we have to parameterize that. So there is another file created along with this template for workspace.json file, and this is where you'll see the those parameters are defined. So in our case, we have one parameter called workspace name, and this is the workspace name for now because this is coming from dev. But as we know, we are going to do the deployment in UAT, so dev has to be replaced by UAT. So we have to parameterize it, right? And this is the one file that we use to do that parameterization. And this time, since we have published the artifacts, or which we have created the ARM templates for deployment, we can go to the pipeline tab on the left of Azure DevOps page, and we can go to library, click on library. We want to do the parameterization of the variables, right? Then click on plus variable group. So we are going to create two sets of variable. One set of variable is going to be used for UAT deployment, another set is going to be used for production deployment. In our case, we just have one variable in each of the environment, but in real deployment you might have more than one variable, right? So you can combine them together in a single group. So let's go ahead and create a variable group for UAT environment. To do that, let me specify a name over here, and this is the name that I'm going to give for the variable group for UAT, and I'm going to add one variable here, and I'm going to name it as a env, and this is going to be the value of UAT, right? So this is one variable group with just one variable. In your scenario, you might have multiple variable to be used during that deployment to that specific environment, right? With that, let me go ahead and click on save, right? I have to do this process for production environment also, right? I can go back to library again and click on plus variable group one more time to create one more variable group. I'm going to give a different name this time for prod, and in this case it's going to be -prod at the end. And again, this is a variable group, and in this we have to create a variable, right? And variable is going to be environment, and this is going to be prod, so PID, right? And then with that, I'm done with creating the variables to map it or parameterize the environment name. If I can go back to library tab again, I'll be able to see both these variables group have been created with the variables, one variable in each, right? So this is done. Once we have these variable groups created, we can go ahead and create the release pipeline, right? So this release pipeline is going to take the deployment template or deployment unit that has been created by publishing from master branch and use these variables to map the parameter and do the deployment on the target, right? So let's go ahead and click on release tab on the left on this Azure DevOps portal, and click on new pipeline that we want to create, and we want to create it based on an empty job, right? So let me click on empty job here, and then I want to name this as UAT, right? So basically what I'm going to do is take the published artifacts from the dev environment and deploy it to the UAT environment. So this stage is going to do. So let me close this and I'll explain you one more time. So if you see here, there are two kind of component over here. The one is the artifact that we are going to take and do the deployment on. So this one is the UAT deployment stage where we are going to do the deployment on UAT. Once UAT stage has been created, we can go to variable tab over here and create a variable which will map the variable that we just created under library tab as part of the variable groups that we have created, right? And the idea over here is we have a variable in release pipeline, and that will be parameterized based on the variable that's coming from the environment variable that we declared earlier with a specific name value over here. So click on add, and let's say workspace. It's the name of the variable, and this is the value for this variable. And if you see here, this value is going to be dynamic, and it's going to be coming from the variable that we declared as part of the variable group earlier, right? And in that variable for UAT, we said the value is UAT, right? So once this is done, let's go to the variable group, and we can link this variable in the release pipeline with the variable group that we created earlier. So in this case, it's going to be UAT. We are doing the deployment to the UAT environment first. And what's the scope of this variable group, right? In this case, I want to limit this scope to UAT environment. So we can say UAT. If I have a variable which is being used across multiple stages, I might like to keep it across all those stages by checking release. But for now, I'm going to be using it within this stage. So let me make it as a UAT stage and link this. Once this is done, we can go back and we can validate, and we can go back again to the pipeline that we just created. At this time, we have created a UAT stage. We have created variables to kind of parameterize the variable value for the workspace. And now what we can do as a next step is specify the source from where these artifacts will come, right? So for that, let's click on this add an artifact link over here. This is going to ask for the source from where this artifact is going to come. And in this case, because our ARM templates are deployed or are kind of stored as part of the workspace _ publish folder, we can click on Azure repository, and this is going to give us the name of the project where from where we have to pick it up. In my case, it's stored here in synapse-cicd-demo-ado. This is the project name, and repository name is again going to be the same as what the project name is. And in the next step, I'm going to choose the publish branch from where I am going to kind of get those deployment unit. And then I have to specify a name to be used as an alias to define it as a source, right? So in this case, I can say dev. So this is my dev environment workspace _ publish from where these artifacts are going to be coming and will be deployed into the UAT environment. So when I click on add, once the source for the artifact is defined, the next step is to go ahead and add a task for doing the actual deployment to the UAT environment. So click on this link. This will open up this screen where we can specify the task that we are going to add. Click on agent job and click on plus sign over here to add the task. At this time, we need to add a task of type Synapse Workspace deployment. This is the task that we are going to do, going to be added to the release pipeline, and this task is coming from the extension that we added in the very beginning of this demonstration. So click on this one to add to this stage, right? And this task requires some settings to be specified, so let's click on this. At this time we need to specify the template, the ARM template, which will be used to create those artifacts on the target, right? So we in the previous screen we selected the folder where those templates are available. At this time we are going to browse through that folder to get the actual name of the template file. So in this case it's going to be template for workspace.json file, right? Likewise, for parameter we need to select the parameter file. So in this case, if we go down to the same folder again, we'll see template parameters for workspace.json file is there. Click on that, and then the next one is how this Synapse how Azure DevOps is going to be connected to the Synapse workspace, right? And for that, like, let's go ahead and let me select the subscriptions that I have and authorize Azure DevOps to connect to my subscription and to do the deployment into resource group. So let me click on authorize for now. This is going to take a couple of seconds. So once the authorization is successful, this will show you the message like this. So what we have done so far is basically we have authorized Azure DevOps Service Principal to connect to the subscriptions that we have specified and do the deployment in that subscription for the given workspace that we have, Synapse workspace that we have. So in this case, I'm going to be using the resource group that I have where the subscription exists, and then I have to specify the name of the workspace where the deployment is going to be done, right? So in this case, this is my UAT environment, so I'm going to be specifying the name of the UAT environment, right? And at this time we also need to override the parameters, right? If you remember from our discussion, we have a parameter in templates for parameter .json file, and then we have one variable that we have created, and we have another variable that we have created in the release pipeline. So this release pipeline variable is going to get the value from the variable group that we have created, and we have to override that to write into the during the deployment process, right? And to do that, we have to say workspace name. This is the name of the variable in the template file, and we are going to use the variable name that we created as part of the release pipeline, right? So we are going, we specified it as a workspace, so we'll say $, and then in the bracket it's going to be workspace. Click on OK, and then click on save. This is going to save our changes. So at this time, what we have done so far is, like, if you go back to the Azure DevOps process that we discussed earlier, or the life cycle that we discussed earlier, we published the artifacts from master to the publish folder, and then we created the release definition. So this is what that release definition is. So we have source, we have target, then we have the mapping of the variables, and then we have task to do the deployment to the target environment. Now, as part of the delivery or as part of the deployment, we have to go ahead and create a release. So click on this create release here, and this is going to be kind of triggered manually, right? So let's go ahead and click on create and let it run. we can click on view releases to look at all the releases that has been created from this pipeline, and this is the release one, which is something we just have kicked up. If you can click on this one, it's going to show you the progress as it starts deploying to the target environment. So I'm expecting this to fail. Once this fails, I'll tell you why it failed and how to fix that, right? So as you can see, this has already failed. We can click on this log and go to the detail screen, where you'll be seeing all the steps that gets executed in order to do deployment on the target side. So this is the exception message that we see over here. So if you click on this exception message, it takes you to a screen where it has the detailed message about why it failed to deploy it into the target environment, right? If you look at the message, this is what it says. It says that the principal, the ID that is given over here, doesn't have required Synapse RBAC permission to perform this action. So it means that even though we have given permission to kind of connect to the target subscription where this workspace exists, the service principal which is being used by Azure DevOps to do deployment into that workspace doesn't have appropriate permission on Azure Synapse side, right? So just copy the service principal ID from here, and let's go to the UAT Synapse Studio that we have, right? In this case, we can go to manage. This is my UAT environment, or like Synapse workspace for UAT environment. And if we go to access control, we can provide the right access to the service principal which is being used to do the deployment. So in this case, come here and click on add, select the role that we want to provide, and in this case the permission is needed to do the deployment on in this workspace is Synapse Artifact Publisher. So select Synapse Artifact Publisher over here, and then just paste the service principal ID that we had from the error message, right? If you do this, click on apply, and this gets, at this time, as you can see, the service principal which is being used by Azure DevOps has been added on target Synapse workspace with appropriate permission to allow it to do the deployment of the artifacts. So this is something that we did it in the UAT environment. And because I'm going to do the deployment into production environment also, right? So let me repeat this process for the production environment before we can do the next step, right? So to do that, I am into this Synapse Studio again, but this time for the production environment. And if I go to manage tab on the left, go to access control, click on add over here, and then select the role that we selected earlier, Synapse Artifact Publisher. Specify the same service principal ID, because the same service principal ID will be used to deploy in both the environment, right? So click on apply, and with that we are done with giving all the permission for it to kind of do the deployment on, right? At this time, we can go back to the release pipeline that we had earlier and close this error message, and we can say deploy it again. So at this time, because we have given right privilege, it should be able to do the deployment, right? So we can click on this, and it's going to be queued and going to be doing the deployment very soon. At this time, you can see that the deployment to UAT has completed successfully. So if we go to the pipeline again over here, you see this, the deployment to UAT is succeeded successfully. And we can validate this by going to the Synapse Studio for the UAT workspace that we have, right? So click on home, and let's go to develop, and we should be able to see a notebook that we have deployed it through the deployment process. Let me refresh the page. As you can see, we have this notebook deployed over here, right? So we can click on this and we can see this notebook is here deployed into UAT environment. If we go to integrate and if we look at the pipelines, you'll see the same pipeline is also deployed here in this workspace, right? Now the one thing that we have to keep in mind is when we are integrating or connecting a workspace with Azure DevOps repository, we do it only for the development environment where we want to maintain the version control or maintain the history of changes that we are doing, and from where we are doing the deployment to the next environment or to the upper environment like test or UAT or production. In the workspaces for test or UAT or production, these are all going to be connected to Synapse Live, right? So that is very important. You would not be connecting test or UAT or production environment to Git repository. The only development environment will get connected. Rest other environment will be connected to Synapse Live, and these environments will get the artifacts deployed as part of the release cycle through the CI/CD process that we have built into the Azure DevOps. So that is very important to consider. Now let's go back to the release pipeline that we created earlier, right? So this is the pipeline that we have created, and we have done the deployment to the UAT environment. So this is the status of the release one that we just completed, right? What we are going to do next is going to change this release pipeline or edit this release pipeline to include production as well, right? So this is the release, the execution instance of the release pipeline. In order to edit the pipeline itself, we have to click on edit and click on edit pipeline. This will take us back to the pipeline that we created earlier, right? So in this, since we have deployment to UAT completed successfully, we can go next step and we can add deployment to production as well. To do that, let's go ahead and clone the stage that we have for UAT deployment. The process is going to be very similar to do the deployment in a production environment. However, there will be some changes that we will have to do. But before that, let's go ahead and clone this, right? So the very first thing that we need to do here is make sure we are naming it appropriately. So this is going to be deployed into the production environment. So we have named it PRD, right? And the next thing is we have to kind of click on task and make sure we have this task pointing to the right environment. So if you can see here, we have Synapse workspace name, and we have this name dynamically being built based on the value of this variable, and this variable is what we have defined for this different environment, right? So if we go here, this is coming from the variables that we have declared earlier. Now in this case, because we have this kind of workspace created for different environments, so we'll go ahead and we'll add this to this variable list again. This was for UAT environment. This is for UAT environment, and we'll add it for production as well. Sorry, it's going to be workspace, and then this is going to be production, and we'll change the scope. This one is going to be UAT, and this one is going to be prod, to differentiate that these two variables are from two different environment. And if we go to a variable group, we can see that we need to add production as well. So let's go ahead and add prod and say this is going to be tied to prod environment, right? So this way we have linked this, right? So this one is going to be UAT only. So I think we need to edit this, change the scope. We have to say this is going to be UAT only, and save this. So we have two set of variable group. One is going to be applicable for UAT, one is going to be applicable for prod. right? And then we have two set of variable, right? And these are all from different environment, right? So this way we are good here so far. So what we need to do next is I'm going to set up this entire deployment process, and I want to make sure every time when there is a change in the publish repository, or basically when a new release is being published to the publish branch, I would say, in that case there should be automated deployment to the event environment. And to do that, we can click on this Thunderbolt here on the source artifact link and click on enabled, right? And then we need to make sure we are selecting the branch from where it will be picking up the new changes, right? So once we have selected this and saved this information, it means that every time when a new publish is coming in, or basically a new template is being generated by clicking on the publish in the workspace, that will trigger the deployment, automated deployment of the build to the UAT environment, right? So this is something I'll save it here, and I'll say I'm done with this deployment into UAT environment. However, for production environment, I do not want the deployment to be automatic, right? I want it to be based on if someone reviews it and approves it, and then it should be deployed into the production environment. So basically the point is, once the development is complete, move it to UAT environment, run all the UAT and UAT test cases, and ensure everything is taken care. And once it passes all the tests, then approve this to be deployed into production environment. To do that, click on this pre-deployment condition and then go to pre-deployment approval section over here, enable this, and then specify the name of the person who is going to be approving. In this case, I'm going to put my name to make it simple for approval, right? And this is the timeout that we can specify, right? So this is 30 days by default. I'll keep it that default as is, and click on cross here and then save this. So with this, all my changes have been done. Now I can go ahead and kick up the process of deployment from end to end perspective, right? And this will also be taken care, or will kick off when there is a new publish to the publish branch. For now, let me kind of go ahead and create a release based on what we have so far. So I'm doing it manually for now. Click on create and go ahead and click on create again, and this has started the deployment. I can click on this link here on release 4, or I can click on view releases, and this is where I'll see all my releases. If I click on this release, this is showing me the current release instance. It's going through the deployment. So let's wait for a couple of seconds for it to complete, and then we'll come back and look at it. Now, as you can see, deployment to the UAT environment has successfully completed, and deployment to production environment is pending for approval. At this time, I can go ahead and approve this request once we have verified that all the test cases have been passed successfully and it's safe to do the deployment in production environment. So this is where I can approve it and kind of start the deployment into production environment. But before that, let me show you something else. While you can see there is a pending deployment to production environment in Azure DevOps, because I'm the approver, I received this email from Azure DevOps intimating me that there is a approval pending for me to start kind of deployment in the production environment. So this is where I can click on view approval to directly jump onto Azure DevOps to do the approval process and start a deployment, or I can go back to this portal and click on approve to start the deployment process. Click again approve here, and this will trigger the deployment to the production environment. So let's wait here and see what happens. I'm expecting it to fail. and we'll look into why it fails and how to fix that in a while. As we were expecting it to fail, it has failed. If we can click on this one, it's going to take us to the page where it actually failed. We can click on this and this shows us the error message, why what caused it to fail, right? So let me go here and show you this error message. And if you see this, it says that data factory resource provider, that component has failed to do the deployment. And this typically happens because if you remember, we have a notebook which gets executed on a Spark pool, and in my dev environment and in test environment or UAT environment, I had that Spark pool already created. So let me go back to my Azure portal and show you this. Right, so if you see here, I have one Spark pool created in development environment on which I executed my notebook or execute my notebook. Likewise, I have a Spark pool created with the same name in UAT environment where I did the deployment through the release pipeline and it was successful. However, I do not have this Spark pool created on the in the production environment, right? And that is why it's failing. So what we need to do is basically we need to go to production workspace that we have and create a Spark pool with the same name what we have in the development environment. So in this case, it's a Spark pool version 3.1 is something the name. So let's go to the production workspace, Synapse Studio here, and click on manage, go to Apache Spark pool, click on new Spark pool, specify the name here. I'm going to give the same name, right? And I'm going to disable auto scaling for now just to keep it simple. Let's make it 3 and let's go to additional setting and say 3.1 is the Apache Spark version I'm going to create, and click on create, and this is going to create the Spark pool, right? So once this is created, we can go back and kick off the release pipeline again, and this should be kind of completed. This is getting deployed. Let's wait for a minute. So Spark pool deployment is completed in production environment. So we have the prerequisite where we wanted to make sure that the Spark pool that we had in the development environment is also there in all the deployment, all the environment where the deployment is being done, right? So we have met this prerequisite to have it in the production environment. Now we can go back here and close this, and we can say and deploy again, and let's go ahead and click on deploy again, and let's see what happens. And this time it's indeed completed successfully. If we go back to release 4 by clicking here, we can see that end-to-end deployment of this release pipeline has completed both to UAT environment and production environment. As I wrap up this video, I would like to highlight these 3 things. First, make sure Azure DevOps Service Principal has Synapse Artifacts Publisher role assigned in the target workspace. Second, integrate only development workspace with Git repository. And third, prepare Spark pool before you migrate your artifacts into your target workspaces. Thank you once again for watching. Please do like, subscribe, and let me know your feedback or any specific topic you would like me to cover next. Looking forward to see you all soon in the next video.